Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We had so much fun last week, we decided to do it again. And
We have to.
because cyber
The
never gets
moral
old.
imperative.
It is. It is. It helps with the sanity and with the relevance, I suppose, because cyber doesn't stop, and we're not allowed to either.
Cyber doesn't
So
sleep. We're not allowed to do that either. There's
I
lots of
wish it
things that
slept.
cyber does.
I wish cyber slept. It'd be so nice if cyber slept. I
I do
want
remember,
to.
it's actually a really good anecdote of the time that you and I, I can't remember, I think we were like going out to lunch and it was a new CEO had just taken over one of the companies that we worked for. And he was like, "Oh, you guys cutting out already?" And we were like, "No, no, no, cyber never sleeps." And we just kept walking.
I forgot about that. That's right.
I'm
We were going.
surprised we didn't get fired.
Well, in all fairness, that company was falling apart at the time, so it's not like it was going to be there much longer. I'm very happy
Not
for
because of
all.
us though, right?
Not be, I'm very happy for the people who were able to successfully sell and make an acquisition to another company, and that they were acquired, and everyone was able to land on their feet, sort
And
of.
this is actually a really good segue into what we're going to talk about today. So, Frank, you did such a good job, being the real host last week that I decided to take some of that
Let's
off of your
trade.
plate this week, and to take a little bit more initiative into the planning and production of this podcast that you put together.
Well,
Um,
can I mention one thing real quick?
Sure.
I want to thank everyone for all the kindness that they've shown us online,
Yeah,
especially on LinkedIn, which make of it what you will there. But it's nice to be able to be back, put something together with Dustin. It's something we've thought about bringing back for a long time,
long
and we
time.
finally got around to it. A lot of people had asked, and apparently they weren't lying. So thank you for the kindness, thank you for the outreach, and if you'd like to like and subscribe, you might see more things as we put it together. Who knows?
Smash that
Anyway,
subscribe button,
smash it, smash it.
as the kids say these days.
Anyway, yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, buddy.
No, that's all right. Speaking of companies going out of business, we're actually here to talk a little bit more. One of the things that we hit on in our last episode was one of my favorite sayings, which is the saying from the Watchmen, which is like, "You're no longer in here with me. I'm in, or I'm not. I You're no longer. I'm not in here with you. You're in here with me," right? And that's the way I've always kind of seen IT and business kind of together, right? IT was a function of business that helped enable business to an extent and help things, be a little bit more productive, faster for the past, I don't know what. I'm going to say like 30 years, but it's probably been like 50
This is
years since we've
yeah,
had
maybe
like mainframes and
dude, we're getting
yeah.
close to 50 years. Do you know Jaws is 50 years old this year? The movie
Okay, so it's
Jaws?
longer than 50 years.
Yeah, it's no, they're having whole all events and everything now. And you got a whole new generation that like has no idea what Jaws is, like our kids and whatnot. And I told Kat, my wife, earlier this morning, I'm like, I'm looking forward to scarring our children, just like I was scarred when I was a kid.
I
Behold
was thinking
cinema.
that like earlier, and sorry, we're going off on a tangent, but that's okay. I was thinking that earlier. My wife and I were talking about like, when can we start showing our daughter like the movies that we saw at her age in the 80s? And we're like,
I don't think you
probably.
can ever show them Neverending Story. We can't show these kids Neverending
Oh,
Story.
right. Yeah, but I think it's like a times two, right? So like we were probably like 4 or 5 when we saw that, so like 10,
Yeah,
10 or 11.
exactly. Yeah, however old we were, probably wait that amount of time further.
Right. Yeah.
Secret of Nim with all them mice and rats and scary, scary. Yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah.
farmers are the bad guys in that movie. So
I, I mean, we will still scar our children. It's just maybe
yeah.
we'll wait a little bit longer. So
Yeah, exactly. So we, business has been around a lot longer than IT, right? A lot, well, debatably, it's been around a lot longer than our modern IT world that we live in and all work in. And to kind of prove that point, we've had a recent slew of attacks that have happened on organizations that have directly impacted business. Of course, it would, because where do you store all your data now? Where's all your customer stuff sitting? Where's all of your inventory sitting? It's all on digital networks. Sometimes they're on digital networks, but they're all in some kind of digital form for the most part, right? So, one of the, there's a couple of examples I'm going to bring up, but one of the, kind of most shocking, uh, you know, uh, things that's happened in recent years, and I think this happened in 2023. An organization known as the Knights of Old, which was established in 1865 in the UK, filed for bankruptcy directly because of a ransomware attack that happened. So they had cyber insurance, they had data security, They really thought that they were prepared for an attack, and they weren't. Not one of the magnitude that happened, anyways. So they filed for bankruptcy. They've been around for over 100 years. It's, that if nothing else kind of proves the worth of cybersecurity to an organization, this story should. And it's not just this story. Stoli, Stoli US, so the vodka distribution company. Same thing happened. They were founded in 1938, I believe. They suffered a ransomware attack. Now, it's debatable whether that ransomware attack was the main reason why they filed for Chapter 11 afterwards, but it was definitely a contributing factor, right? So, in other words, a cybersecurity event has caused another organization or been a very big part of another organization filing for bankruptcy. TravelX is another example, founded in 1976, had an attack, filed for bankruptcy, and recently, luckily, haven't filed for bankruptcy yet, but Marks and Spencer, another organization founded in 1884, suffered a data breach caused by ransomware. Their stock has only fallen 11%. They're a publicly traded organization. That still is pretty big, but if you look at their overall growth, it's okay. They're still doing okay, right? If they can recover from this, they'll be fine, and they might be able to. So there's with those stories in mind, and with what we talked about last week, uh, we touched a little bit on proactive cybersecurity and kind of what that means. But from your perspective, you work with organizations on a day-to-day basis, doing proactive services, doing things that are trying to for lack of a better term, and I think this term is kind of becoming more and more popular, digital resiliency, right? Or just overall resiliency of an organization. um, what do you think that these incidences reveal about the vulnerabilities, even with an established company?
I really like that question because it touches on a lot of answers. And I know that sounds really weird, but it's something that I think you and I see in cybersecurity on a regular basis. And I'll start small and then I'll get bigger. Or maybe I'll go all around. We'll see. Right.
You jump around. It's fine. We'll get it.
Or it might just be like my personal self. Some days I'm small, some days I'm big. Anyway, um, the first thing I want to think of is there's, as you and I have been in this field for the amount of time we have, there's a lot of different perspectives that apply to cybersecurity that you see adopted by leadership in organizations. And there's organizations who are my preference, and I think you can agree as well, where they take cybersecurity seriously. They understand it's a legitimate concern. Oh, legitimate cybersecurity concern, right? There you go. And they act accordingly. That is very hard to do. And it's hard to do for a lot of reasons, but mostly because it requires perpetual commitment.
Hmm.
And I say that because you have to be able to get the right people, and the stats aren't getting better with cybersecurity, right? You have at least 3 to 6 months to find the right person, and then you have multiple months of them getting trained up. But you can find people quicker, but you're really rolling the dice on if they're actually applicable, qualified professionals. As an individual who has hired someone who looked great on paper just to realize that they were a Muppet, it's, not that maybe there are good Muppets at cybersecurity. I'm sure Elmo has all of his cyber squared away, right? And Big Bird didn't stay around this long without keeping his records secure. Anyway, it requires a lot of commitment and it still isn't guaranteed because even if everything goes right, we live in a naturally reactive environment with cybersecurity. People are always coming up with new ways of attacking, new ways of doing things. So even though it's not a silver bullet, it will protect you more. Then there's the other mentality that really stresses me out as well. There are, and one more point on that. Even if you get the right people, that doesn't mean you have to hire a whole team. Keep that in mind as well. But you need at least 1 to 2 people to manage the cybersecurity program, to work with the MSSPs, right? To work with the patching teams at the SOCs that they're hiring, right? You can hire and outsource this stuff, and you can have those companies that come to help you, but you still need to be dedicated to improving and keeping track of things, because other organizations become susceptible and fall to this other mindset that I want to discuss, which is where they'll either ignore it or do the absolute minimum, and that they'll get an MSP and then say they're done, right? Oh, I got MSP. What? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of antivirus do you have? Well, I don't know. I got MSP, MSP,
Yeah.
MSP, MSP. Right? They view it as they bought it. They're safe, and that is a big struggle. You and I see that all the time.
Yeah.
And
It's the
then
idea of like risk transference being true.
right,
I'm not saying
and
it's not true in all cases, but it's like, oh, everything's in the cloud, so we're not really liable for any of that data. I've heard that before,
I
right?
heard
And I
that
think
just last week. I said,
there you go.
I asked the company, where are your backups? Well, backups don't matter. What do you mean? Well, we're in the cloud. No, you still might want some backups. Okay, well, we have a
You might want to
couple.
look into that. Yeah,
And it's
it's
like, well, did
important.
you test them? Well, no, the backups are backed up. Well, did you test to make sure they're not corrupted? And a corrupted backup didn't get backed up? And you hear, what? Um, I agree. And then another part to this problem, and also for anyone thinking that that's a solution, there's no MSP in the world that will sign an SLA that will fully transfer all risk and liability to them from you. That doesn't exist. It's a fairy tale. And anyone who has you sign that is actually a con man, and they're going to steal your money.
Yeah, talk about Chapter 11. That's
Yeah. And,
speaking of bankruptcy.
and then the last point I want to get to is the insurance element of all of this. Increasingly, you and I have started to see that while companies can buy insurance plans to protect them from incidents, more insurance companies are starting to put in exceptions into these policies saying, if it looks like it's an advanced persistent threat, an APT, it doesn't count. We won't help you. We won't reimburse you. We won't do anything. And the problem with that is APTs use all the same tools that regular attackers and cyber criminals do. So it's a really questionable policy once that gets slid in. So yeah, I'm not surprised that these companies are getting taken down because it's really hard to do cyber well. And I think the older the company, the more susceptible they are to entrenched mindsets that may not create room for cyber. At least that's my first blush at it. What do you think?
No, I think you absolutely hit on several things there that are really important. First of all, emerging threats. And I'm not gonna like a company that's been around since the 1800s has seen quite a few threats to business, right? They've seen war. This is in the UK. They lived through the Blitz, right? There's a lot of things that these companies have been so resilient towards, and all it took was a bad password, or easily guessable password that took down the entire organization. Emerging threats is a big thing, and businesses know how to navigate that. They've done it before. These older businesses have done it before. And so there is this like weird, I don't want to call it like a mental block, but there is something about the digital world that seems to have business folks stumped when it comes to being resilient. Maybe it's because of the vastness of it, right? So instead of a country next door to you, attacking you physically, it's a country that usually has nothing to do with anything you have to do with halfway around the world. And it actually doesn't even have to be a country. It can just be one person in that country who's smart enough, right? Who can circumvent all of your protective controls, all of your policies, fool your employees with social engineering. That's all it takes. And AI, let's bring that word up, because we talked about large language models last week and talked about their limitations. What they're not limited to is writing things really well, which we also said in the last episode. So if you think you're going to be able to suss out social engineering attacks, by saying, oh, improper grammar, wrong spelling, that's not a thing anymore. Anybody has access to OpenAI now, right? Anybody can have it type something up in English really quick from their own language, and it'll do it. And it'll do it. There still are some telltale signs that AI wrote something, right? We still have those detectors out there, but for a normal human being to sit there and read something and try to suss out whether it's truly written, someone is English as a second language, or maybe English is not a language at all, it's making it almost impossible to do, right?
It's getting really
So
hard. Even when you count the fingers now, the fingers in the photos, they're
yeah,
all there. They
human,
have the right amount of fingers. I remember during during the election cycle last year, where there was flooding in North Carolina, and there's this really prevalent photo of this girl and a puppy in the flood, and everyone was like, "Look at this poor kid and this poor puppy." It was fake. It was
yeah.
fake, but it was a really impressive fake. So AI, it gets to your point. AI is getting better every day.
Right. And the uncanny valley is a true thing that happens, right? And we usually talk about it, and when it happens with faces, or there's just something odd or something really weird. When it's written word, though, it's not as prevalent. It's not something that, is as detectable as if you see AI photos and you're like, there's something off. You see the deep fakes with videos and people's mouths moving. You're like, there's
Right.
just something off about it or something weird. Writing, not so much, right? Especially if it's something like, hey, I need you to write that report, or I need you to change this ACH for this transfer, or this $1 million transfer, or this is the CEO of the company. And that's a really hard thing to detect. So you touched on emerging threats and how like that's just such a it's so hard for some of these organizations, especially if they've been around for a long time, but even startups, to kind of understand, right, that you even need cybersecurity to begin with. But it is a function, and you and I see this every day too, where the role of cybersecurity within an organization is being taken more seriously for sure. However,
Not
um,
because they want to take it seriously. That's the point. That's the problem. It's
yeah,
not because there's an inherent desire to operate securely. It's because there's this whole or else mentality that is at the back of their brain. They're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of being hacked. They're afraid of this. They don't actually want to do cybersecurity. It's being treated similar to, one may almost say, like taxes, right? No one likes to do their taxes. No one likes to file them. They do it. And I would I'm not saying you should enjoy your taxes. That's not my statement here. But having this or else or doing what not wanting to do cybersecurity can really lead to the bare minimum at best in a lot of cases, which is insufficient for almost every case.
absolutely. And in that, we see, you mentioned hiring, we see a lack of true leadership within cybersecurity, meaning that um, you might have your COO be your CISO. You might have a director be your CISO. You might have a engineer be your CISO. And we see this. This isn't just anecdotal at this point. Now this is actually diving into some research that is happening, that is showing that for a lot of organizations, and I know I'm saying research, and I'm talking general numbers here, or I'm not even saying numbers, but it it it's interesting how many organizations are out there without leadership that has direct access to a CEO, right? So you have, yeah, we get there. It's our cyber guy. He does our engineering for ADP.
Right.
These are ADP
Or
engineers.
yeah, they make our apps, so the lead is also in charge of that. The one that always gets me is the CFO is our is also our CISO because and it's like there's never a good answer. It's like, oh, because they do your finances, they know computer, great.
Right.
um,
Yeah, exactly. And we work with I've worked with organizations like that. You've worked with organizations like that. And nothing against those people. Those people actually do have that in mind, because it is now part of their job.
Correct.
And they hate the tech. You're right. They hate the technical aspects of cybersecurity, where they're like, just go talk to the vendor, go talk to our IT folks, or go talk to this person, and convey the idea you just told me, and I'll do the executive part, you handle this part, and it's fine. I do like, I do enjoy actually that aspect of my job, where I get to translate kind of business speak into technical speak, and back and forth. Um, but it is always hard. It's a hard idea to convey to folks who have their MBA, or are the CEO, and they're like, well, I'm a business person. And you kind of have to explain it into their terms, because they are the CEO, right?
Exactly.
They're the leaders. They're the ones who are like, no, you tell me in my language, please. And it's like, okay, but you got to learn to speak my language a little bit, because these are new emerging threats, things that we're talking about. Um, and one of the ways that we do this, Frank, is you and I especially, we push really hard on adopting a framework, or a standard, right?
It makes it easier. It gives it consistency for people who don't. It's I don't want to say it's bunting, but it is. It's you don't have to put as much. You don't have to reinvent the wheel each time.
Right. And but I also feel like that does put it. If you put something in a framework, or you put something in a standard, it gives a framework. It gives a structure to what you're trying to accomplish. and also helps you do a little bit of gap analysis, right? But also helps you kind of convey these ideas. So, like if you're talking about NIST CSF, we've got the now I'm gonna be embarrassed. Is it 6 domains now or 5 domains? Is it still 5 domains?
It's no, it's
It's
six
six.
domains now.
Yeah, that's right. Governance was added, right?
I'm not saying I
So
like the new domain because it was already there. They just decided to make it a whole new domain. I have a whole lot of complicated feelings with NIST CSF. Anyway, please continue.
yeah. So on the but on that question then, and framed in this kind of like, how do we convey this kind of idea? How do we work with businesses that have been around a long time? What are in your mind, like what are some essential components to cybersecurity frameworks that we help organizations implement on a daily basis?
Well, first, let me do a little bit of, let's explain a few words. NIST, as far as nomenclature is, NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. They're in charge of what it sounds like, determining standards and what qualifies as things in technology. For example, they have the standard ingredients for peanut butter, and you can get jars of peanut butter for over $200 because NIST says this is exactly what peanut butter is. Super weird. And then CSF stands for the Cybersecurity Framework. This is a framework that was developed in 2014 by the Obama administration to provide small businesses, and basically businesses at every level, to be honest. It's not just small businesses, a framework that they could use in order to manage their cybersecurity programs. It's made up of controls. Controls are actions or things you can do to create cybersecurity in your organization. My thoughts on these, and there's many other frameworks, just this is the one we're referencing right now. My thoughts on adopting these frameworks is that, one, as I mentioned, it does help with businesses in that it gives them rules, it gives them instructions. It's an instruction manual to cyber. If you do this, you should be more secure, right? But also it helps take something like cyber, which can be a bit, we mentioned people don't want to do it, and it can feel very esoteric at times, and that not everyone understands what they're, where to go about it, or they don't understand the nomenclature, and make it more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that element. And then the fact that cybersecurity professionals fight over what the best framework is, that's great, because that means that people are using frameworks. So hooray, it's great. But when one of the benefits of using these frameworks are that then you see a consistency in nomenclature across the entire field. So if you go to one company that has has CSF implemented, and you go to another company that has CSF implemented, another one, there's a consistent verbiage, there's a consistent understanding of controls, there's a consistent understanding of what can be done in order to secure an organization. I think they are great. I'm also glad that we've gotten past this hump that was probably a wave cresting maybe seven-ish years ago, where everyone and their cousin thought they knew that the real framework was truly within them, and they were writing a framework.
Yes.
And they would come and say, behold, this is the actual framework you should use. You saw all these startups literally start up entire companies just over like, hey, I wrote down good ideas for cyber, which I will say, you should write down good ideas.
Yes.
But when you have your own, and then you on top of it do things like copyright it or try to patent it, and you're not making it accessible, the usefulness becomes very questionable. And it's why ones such as the NIST CSF has stuck around so long and gained in more popularity. I hear a lot more people, and I'm interested in your thought about this, because this gets to the many frameworks that are out there. I'm very interested in your perspective, because I have more clients now that are interested in having a CSF based maturity assessment or creating a CSF based program compared to, say, an ISO program, right? An ISO 27001. Or, what was there? There was a risk management framework that was popular like in 2020, 2021. FAIR, maybe? I don't know. That's how long it's been. Where they
It's ringing a
would bring
bell.
it in. And there's even the CMMI one
Mm-hmm.
that is separate from the CMMI Cyber Maturity Platform Framework, because that inherently has its own framework. But then there's another one that they made for cybersecurity and safety. I haven't heard anybody ask for that. Like, no one even knows if that exists. So I'm interested in what you're seeing gain traction and what's being used most as, this whole framework reality is developing.
Yeah. So first off, there is vast confusion in the industry about the difference between a standard and a framework. And that it's fair, because if you think about it,
I
if you're
probably
not
got it mixed up
required.
just now when I was talking about all of these standards
No,
and
no, no,
frameworks.
but you're right. You can use ISO 27001 as
Yep.
a framework.
True.
You most certainly can do that. You might not get your ISO 27001 certification if you're just using it as a framework instead of a standard, but you can do that. I've actually, where I saw some confusion in my studies that I was really surprised about was a mix up of 853 and 80171 as a standard versus a framework.
But yeah, but yeah.
If you don't have to do those, why would you use those as your
Especially
framework?
853, when people come in with 853 and they're like, we want to be 853 compliant. I'm like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, yeah. What does that mean to
And
you?
why
That's
did you
right.
pick one of the hardest ones?
Yeah,
Let's
and
discuss.
then throw in there SOC 2, right? And it's like, I passed my SOC 2 audit. It's like, well, you don't really pass or fail a SOC 2 audit. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can get a report card that's so bad that you will never be able to partner with anybody ever again until you fix the issues. And yeah, I guess that's a fail, right? But it's not really like a pass fail. It's like these are the controls that are in place according to COSO and according to AICPA, and you're good to go, like as far as doing business with this other
And
person, right?
one random accountant will sign a piece of paper attesting saying, yeah, you're good at cyber. That's what SOC 2 is right there, right? At the end of the
That's
day,
right.
it still has to be some rando accountant says you're good at cyber, which if that's not a great allegory for so much of cyber, I don't know what else is.
Yep. And then throw on top of that, there's one more thing is certifications, right? Which we kind of mentioned with ISO 27001, but there's high trust and there's other certifications you can get, which are basically telling organizations, yep, we got our ISO 27001 certification, which means we use ISO 27001 as a standard. High trust, same thing. It's actually high trust is kind of like ISO 27001 base, but more on the healthcare, like more toward, like geared towards. But this also matches with Security Rule 45 and Privacy Rule 45, right? With HIPAA in the United States. What I see is a lot of people turning to NIST CSF because NIST CSF is first of all free,
Yeah,
right?
free's
Uh,
great.
it's just a framework, but it also has mappings to lots of other framework standards, compliances, privacy thing like GDPR. Like it's got all these great resources that are available to you again for free
Crosswalks. A
that you
lot
can
of
use. Yeah,
crosswalks.
right. And to your point about, we still do have people out there who are like, I use my own thing, but I pull from ISO 27001 here, I pull from NIST CSF here, I pull from 853 here. Great, that's great. At least they're pulling from something. Uh, but to your original point of the, I don't want to say audacity, but something along those lines of a person who's like, I know more about cybersecurity than a room full of cybersecurity experts who built NIST CSF,
That have
right?
been gathered from across the world, no
Across the
less. Yeah.
world. ISO 27001, the same thing. As you know, I actually had the privilege of going to ISO 27001 meet in Paris in 2018, where we actually got to talk about, next versions, new controls we had to put out, new things to put. It was great. And I mean, these people are incredibly passionate. I saw some arguments. I saw lots of arguments
There's a lot of them.
in that,
They fight
but
a lot.
all professional, level arguments where people were, coming together and very passionate about their ideas. But at the end of the day, it's voted on and then it's gone, and then everybody goes and has a beer, and we're all happy. We're all happy to be doing cyber in Paris. But so we talked. Now I got to go back and see what I talked about here. So we talked about the confusion of framework standards, certifications, attestations, all those great things. NIST CSF is definitely the most prevalent in the United States. And we have kind of seen an international adoption of it as well, right? Whether that's because it's free and it's easy, and anybody can download it all around the world. But as we see more of these privacy rules come out in other countries, there needs to be more. And there is, again, the mappings that happen, but because the United States doesn't really have a privacy rule, there's we're starting to see privacy leak into cybersecurity the same way that cybersecurity is leaking into business, right? So now we're having to figure all this out. One of the reasons why most of these organizations went down, or had issues with doing business is because of the idea of the privacy of the data that was stolen, ransomware, whatever you want to call it, right? And so that is quickly becoming a business/cybersecurity problem, is the privacy of the data, right? And
100%.
And because countries are, most countries' governments, not the United States, but most countries' governments are concerned about the privacy of their citizens.
I hear
Now,
California is kind of interested in it, but that's the only state.
fair enough, and there have been some states that have done their own legislation, right? Uh, with that being said, though, you and I also work with our friends across the pond, and we do work with some companies that are based in the EU, and there are some issues with that level of requirement of even a smaller business to have these kind of protections and privacies on that data. It's really hard to get a startup going because you have to have these protections in place. It's really hard to find an MSSP because you have to have your data stored in a sort of specific area around the world, right? So we kind of see these issues popping up, and that, depending on where it's based, that might make it more expensive, or they know that they're only, certain, so they can jack up the prices. And the US is, the wild west over here, and we can get cloud space
Storing
super
data
cheap.
everywhere, flinging it all over the place. It's the
That's
currency of the
right.
internet, right?
That's right. And uh yeah, so I think as far as, frameworks and standards go, the important part is that you're using one, and that it's a peer reviewed one, right? It's not just,
100%.
it's okay to take from pieces and build your own. That's fine. People do that all the time. They use nesting when it comes to, frameworks and standards. For SDLC, that's not necessarily, there is a NIST thing for it, but it's not 800, or it's not CSF. So, what do you like? It's part of CSF. It says make sure you're doing SDLC, but that's not the standard, or the standard or the framework you would use for conducting SDLC, right?
Yep. And
So,
also, any company using SDLC already gives me a level of comfort, because a lot of companies making applications out there don't. And for those who don't know the abbreviation, that's software development lifecycle. Having controls in place and processes in place to develop software in a organized manner, rather than just, rise and grind and vibe coding a bunch of stuff out and then releasing it.
and
Nothing
then
wrong with
injecting
rise
a
and
certain
grind or
amount
vibe coding, by the way. But
of vibe coding. That's right.
yeah,
That's right. We've a
that's the
colleague of
age we
ours
live in.
recently brought that term
Half
to
this
our attention.
podcast is probably vibe coded. I don't know. I'm shoving it all in AI already. So there we go.
Yeah, I'm vibing. I'm having a
Yep.
good time. Everybody else is tuned out
And
already. It's just you
we're
and
all
me, a good friend.
vibing. We're all made of code, genetic
Yep.
code,
It's
and
good to
we're
be back.
vibing. So there we go.
So, with those kinds of things in mind, last question here, for the group. Um, we hear that, like, there are lots of buzz terms. We mentioned a couple already, that are, becoming more and more prevalent. One of the buzz terms that kind of came about and surprised me when it first came out was a culture of cybersecurity. Building a culture of cybersecurity within your organization. But most, especially speaking of the first organization that we brought up earlier in the podcast, the one that went out of business and went bankrupt after 150 years of being in business. The issue is that an employee was not either not following a secure password methodology, or was not prescribed one. Um, and with that brings us to the weakest parts of our networks, which is us. And I'm not saying employees because I'm an employee of a company. It's us. It's just humans in general. Frank, you and I are just as likely to make a mistake as anybody else.
100%.
So building the culture of cybersecurity within an organization, making sure that our employees are aware, of the dangers that are out there of using that, not secure password. How do you how do you see leadership being able to drive that within organizations, the ones that you work with?
How do I see leadership enforcing password policies, would you say? Because I got news for you. The answer is inconsistently.
Yeah.
I got a couple fun stories for this,
Yeah.
because they're specifically around password policies and so forth. First and foremost, there's a lot of tools out there for most organizations to require specific password policies and force them on individuals through profiles that they configure. What I consistently find interesting is, despite having this capability and despite having policies or governance that require it, they still place the onus on the employees to know to do it, rather than pushing down a profile that requires them to do it. And there's a couple different reasons when I ask these companies why are you not just forcing it, and the answers come back from a lot of different ways. And this applies to DLP too, in my opinion. both of these two controls specifically? The
Hmm.
answers are, well, people complained. People complained.
Yes.
And yeah, I complain. That doesn't mean I get what I want. I complain all day, every day, right? I complain to my kids to just clean up after themselves. No, right? But we can complain. Complaining shouldn't be a reason for for a risk acceptance and security because people complained. But more often than not, it does creep up. So I asked them, well, then how do you manage this risk? And I have gotten amazing answers. Everything from, well, we just what I find very interesting is one of the ones that comes quickly in mind: corporal punishment. Well, we just fire someone to make an example of them. It happened once with one company I worked with, and it created more harm than good. Right?
Yes.
It made people not want to use computers and not communicate, and it actually really hampered the culture overall.
Hmm.
The funniest one that I had was, well, the guy who keeps causing infractions, we keep an eye on him, and he's in his 80s, so he'll die soon, and it won't be a problem. I'm like, what? Your risk plan here is just wait for him to die?
Yeah,
And
that's
they're
not a
like,
great,
well,
not a great
yeah.
strategy.
So that's been my favorite so far. But most people try to split the baby in some way where they'll apply it to new hires, but not necessarily to older people who've been there, and they'll take that know before subscription and just hammer people with phishing training and hammer and hammer and hammer them and require that it becomes a nightmare. Which honestly is probably one of the more effective ways because people hate having mandatory training assigned to them and really hate being annoyed by those mandatory training requirements. And the more they crop up, the worse, and they'll want to change their lifestyle, right? It's like, okay, I've had 3 heart attacks. I think I should start eating well. It's like, okay, I've, done 2 phishing responses, I guess, and I keep getting all these, notices. I should probably, rethink my life. But those are usually like what I've seen with, especially, with passwords, because you're right. Put weak passwords. I mean, you and I know how easy it is. We used to make training on how to brute force and crack. Man, I remember all those graphics cards we'd buy, right, where we'd use CUDA to run all those brute force attacks, and it's it's it works. Now, one thing I have seen crop up more often that I really do like, and this isn't with necessarily weak passwords, but this is with you know, more of a known password thing. So guessing attacks like brute force have been less successful because more companies and organizations are putting a lockout period on them. Okay, you did 3 of them wrong. We're locking you out. Nothing changes until you talk to IT. So I do like that, and I do appreciate seeing more of that. But that's about the full extent. That's a kind of sorry. That's a long-winded, comprehensive kind of perspective I've seen. I don't know if you're seeing anything different.
Yeah, building a culture of cybersecurity, or it's like you say enforcing, and then you're not. Now it's no
Right.
longer. I mean, that is the culture. Then, if you're forcing, someone to do cybersecurity within your organization. Um, Look, we're in a really interesting time, I think, in human history where business is not looked at the same way as it was even 20 years ago. I watched a recent podcast on. They interviewed a Generation Z person and a baby boomer. They had them back to back, and they had them,
Neither of them
asking
know
their
how
questions.
printers work, by the way. They all need us to set up printers. Why the
That's
millennials will
right.
stay around. We know how to print.
So what was interesting is they all had the same concerns, and the baby boomer generation was kind of like, I don't think your generation really understands how hard you have to work in order to get where you need to get to, and the Generation Zers were of course like, well, work life balance is way more important than anything else, right? So there, and I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive necessarily. I think you can work hard and still have a good work life balance, and I think there's just this shift that's kind of happening in the mentality of businesses, and the boomers in there mentioned that, hey, when I got a job as a young man or a young woman, uh, I was secure. I had a job. I had secured a job, and I was going to have that job for possibly 20, 30 years. And I was going to retire from that job. And even they were like, that's no longer the case. We don't feel like that's the case. The boomers were saying this is no longer the case. And they totally empathized with the Gen Zers on that. They were like, oh, yeah, yeah, oh, 100% agree with you. Like, companies are not what they used to be anymore. So if you're trying to instill a culture cybersecurity or of secure practices within an organization, you first have to prove that you're a worthy enough entity for someone to care about you enough to ensure that you're using secure practices.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to get fired for sure. Like, we don't want to get fired because of an accidental data breach. But so there's a few things you have to do, right? You have to prove to employees that you do have, yes, we all are here to make our organizations money and to make organizations more secure. And this is what we do, you and I do for a living. That being said, the organization has to then also say, we're investing in our employees. We're giving you guys training, real training, not click through training on how to, how to spot a spam or a phishing email or something like that, but true training on how to stay secure, and not just stay secure for your organization, but stay secure for your life. It's not just organizations that are being hit. It's I mean, but there are municipalities that are being hit. There are hospitals that are being hit every day with ransomware, causing massive outages, causing possibly loss of life, which is crazy. So not only that, but there are personal attacks that are happening to folks too, where they're like, I got to pay 300 Bitcoin to get my get my Windows 7 machine back up and running. Like, this is happening still today.
Yeah, there's still, and soon it's going to be a bunch of Windows 10 machines because those aren't going anywhere anytime
That's
soon,
right.
and support's ending
That's
in
right.
October.
Yeah. And so we have this responsibility, as leaders in business, as advisors to leaders in business, to make sure that we're putting these things into the perspective of not just an organization context, but putting it into like a lifelong context, right? One of the I think I went to Black Hat Europe in 2018, and there was an Israeli group who got up and they talked about what they were doing for their cybersecurity training for kids K through 12. Amazing, right? And one of the things that was coming out of there is like biometrics, right? So like, kids and their iPhones these days are sharing they're putting their fingerprints and their face prints in their friends' phones so they can unlock it and talk and do all that kind of stuff. So it's like, whoa,
Into
so
each
don't
other's
do that.
phone?
Yes,
Yeah,
into each other's
yeah.
phones.
That's a great
And so,
idea.
like, learning
That won't
about
come
this
back
at
to
a
haunt you whatsoever.
Right. So, but they're training at a very young age, right? And the United States, I don't necessarily think is leading in any one of those. You and I worked with some organizations that K through 12 were trying to train cybersecurity and trying to train that into children younger. But we still have this whole workforce that was not born with technology being around, the technology that we have today, anyways. So we're not only having to train our new folks, who I think our children who are coming up and living with this stuff every day. We're having to kind of go back and retrain security at another level. So there's a couple different aspects here. First of all, there's cross-generational stuff going on left and right. We got to be able to speak to both of them. Two, um, organizations have to realize that they have to have employees who are invested in success and continual success of that organization. And there are many different ways to do that. There are many scientific articles out there on different leadership styles that work and don't work, different incentives that work and don't work. And if you want to do something that's the numbers based and science based, then I highly recommend going and reading those and and following the advice that organizational psychologists and leadership folks are doing on a regular basis. That kind of thing. So you got to build that culture up. It's paramount that you do it. If not, you're going to have that one employee who's just not going to give a flying thing
Who will never
about whether their password is secure or
who will
not.
never care. And all I can say is I think the example is great. It all comes down to printing, and it's all going to rely on us, just like security. Just like security, we got to teach the earlier generation and the later generation, millennials. We're the only ones that can print. We're going to have to teach them all how to print because we are. And I'm going to start using that as my main tool for cybersecurity to teach, because you and I both know they're arguably the least secure devices on every network. On top
Oh
of
God,
it,
yeah.
so
On a very regular basis, we find printers with issues.
the burden of millennials teaching both Gen Z and Boomers how to print,
There you go.
with Gen Xers just not wanting to anymore.
And we
So
just lost half of our audience, so thank you,
yeah.
Frank.
Oh,
Which is
sorry
only two
guys.
people, so that's all right.
Sorry, maybe learn to print. We don't even have an email up yet. They don't even know where to send their anger to. You
No,
know
they'll
what?
send it on
Comment.
LinkedIn.
Comment all your anger on YouTube. It'll get our numbers up. Be angry.
That's right. No.
Anyway,
Here
well,
come the comments.
thank you, Dustin. I
Yeah.
mean, this was a great
Thank you.
topic. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's listened up to this point. Our biggest recommendation. Side note, if you do want a printer, just buy a Brother Black and White. Just buy that, connect it. I've had it for a long time. And the one that I bought back in 2013 is still on sale now. So
That
there's
is
a
the one
reason
that I
for it.
have too. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Or,
Fair.
give up, buy crayons, go the old way and just draw. But yeah, thank you
Big
so much for
Generation
your
Z
time.
people are like, you guys still print?
Yeah, they still print. It's like faxing, right? And that's the worst.
Right.
Every now and then when you realize the only way to send something is you've got to fax, and then you're like, I don't
Oh,
even know where to find one anymore.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Oh, well, thank you everyone. Thanks for joining us. And maybe see you next week. I don't know if we're not busy, but who knows? But we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.